Hi everybody. Thank you for joining us today on our podcast, Disrupting Innovations, an Integrated Care podcast. In today's episode, I will be talking with Lyndsey Steele and Amber Eck from Milestone Pediatrics, and we'll be talking specifically about the new Astronaut Training occupational therapy program that Amber is offering at Milestones. So let me tell you a little bit about our guest today. Lyndsey Steele is the president and owner and co-founder of Milestone Pediatrics. She has a background in disabilities communities, and she has been working in that community for more than 14 years. She started her work in the Child Development Lab at Arizona State University, working as a student researcher. And Lyndsey, I haven't told you this before, but I actually started my career in that same study.
Oh, did you? Oh, wow. Very interesting.
Back in the 90s, a great to learn. I feel like, wow, I learned so much being, as a part of that program.
Absolutely.
And so Lyndsey did research on parent-child predictors of social competence with peers in children with and without autism. And throughout her education, she continued to study child development, family dynamics, parent and adolescent relationships, and she graduated with an emphasis in infancy, which is a pretty rare thing for those of you listening who aren't really aware. She began her professional career as a developmental specialist, providing one-on-one intervention to children ages 0 to 3, addressing motor skills, social skills, and language development in the early intervention program. Lyndsey currently manages the clinical operations at Milestones Pediatrics in the therapy program at all 3 clinical locations, as well as in the teletherapy services and home-based therapy services. Big job. In addition to her love of working with children with developmental disabilities, she's always been passionate about supporting parents and their journey, whether they are a parent of a child with a disability, a parent of multiples, or a parent of a premature infant, or all of the above sometimes with the families I've worked with. For over 5 years, she served on the executive board for a local nonprofit supporting parents of multiples and provided mentorship to new moms. Lyndsey currently sits on the therapy committee for Arizona Association of Providers for People with Developmental Disabilities. And she received the Phoenix Business Journal's 40 Under 40 Award in 2019. Congratulations. So welcome, Lyndsey. And we also welcome Amber Eck, an occupational therapist. And Amber was born and raised in El Paso, Texas, and earned a master's of occupational therapy at Texas Tech University and Health Sciences Center in Lubbock, Texas. She graduated in December 2019 and she's practiced in a variety of settings, including home health, acute care, and pediatric outpatient services since then. Her interest in occupational therapy started when she watched her grandpa receive home health OT services after hip and knee replacements. She instantly fell in love with how this profession entails a holistic approach to improving an individual's daily life. And her love for OT came from watching her grandpa receive services. However, she also used to teach dance classes for kiddos diagnosed with Down syndrome, which is where her passion for working with children grew. She currently practices occupational therapy at an amazing clinic called Milestone Pediatrics in Phoenix. A majority of her experience has been working with kiddos diagnosed with Down syndrome, autism, and sensory processing disorder. Working with kiddos with these diagnoses led her to become interested and certified in providing the Astronaut Training protocol, which I can't wait to hear more about. It sounds like a really revolutionary tool. So Amber loves working with children and young adults to find their passion in life, remove blocks that are keeping them from being their most awesome self, and learn to live a life that they have always dreamed. So I just love your bios, ladies. We have so much in common. We'll get to that. So a little bit about Milestones. At Milestones, this pediatric clinical business strives to provide quality speech therapy, occupational therapy, music therapy, and respite and habilitation services to children with developmental disabilities to enable them to reach the fullness of their potential. They have locations in Chandler, Phoenix, and Tucson, Arizona, and they provide a range of therapy services that are client-centered and focused on helping the whole family. They help children of all ages with a variety of special needs, and therapists have worked with children with many types of disabilities, including Down syndrome, autism spectrum disorder, genetic disorders, communication disorders, attention disorders, sensory processing disorders, and others. And the big news about Milestones is that they are not just a single award winner. They are a multiple award-winning practice, having received the Best of 2020 Chandler Award for Youth Social Services Organizations, the 2019 Small Business Award, the 2016 Bright Futures Women in Business Award from the Phoenix Mercury, which is our hometown women's basketball NW National Women's Basketball Association team. And they also won the 2015 Telemundo Hispanic Business Salute Award for dedication to the community, and finally have been voted as one of the 19 best speech therapy agencies in Phoenix in triple years, 2016, 2019, and 2020. So let's all just take a moment and say, wow, ladies, you're rocking it. And I'm so excited to be talking to you today. So welcome to you both.
Thank you. And I just have to add, our most recent award that we found out about last week is we received the Phoenix Business Journal's largest women-owned business award again this year. So last year we were number 73, and then this year we moved up to 41. So we're the another award winner for this year.
Wow, you're just gonna keep winning awards. Let's just say it. It's just gonna keep on going, without a doubt. You're already killing it. So awesome. Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about Milestones. It sounds like a really special place. There really aren't a lot of places that integrate so many services under one roof. And the population that you serve is different from the traditional pediatric, population. So, Lyndsey, tell me a little bit about how you became interested in opening an integrated clinic in this way for this population here in Arizona.
Sure. So my business partner and I, Rebecca, both started providing early intervention services, 0 to 3 population. She serviced the families that were Spanish speaking in the East Valley, and then I served all the English speaking families in the East Valley. And we both felt like, or I felt like, there's more that I can do beyond my reach. I'm only one person in providing services to however many families, but I knew that there was a larger need than what my individual reach could handle. And Rebecca and I joke, but over margaritas at California Pizza Kitchen, we discovered that we had this mutual passion to serve this underserved population, and that we both felt like there was a larger need. And so Milestone Pediatrics was born. We started with, while we were writing our contract with the state, we did a preschool program, parents' night out, anything that we could do to just try to support families. And then our business growth has always been organic. So we started with respite and rehabilitation, later on added home-based speech therapy, opened our first clinic, and then the clinics kept growing and growing. So now we have speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, music therapy, all that take place in the clinic, as well as statewide, from Flagstaff to Nogales, Surprise to Florence, covering the entire state. And then we have home-based caregiving services, attendant care, rehabilitation, and respite. And so we feel like we have the ability to serve the whole family, getting all of their therapy needs, all their caregiving needs, and just assisting in their growth.
Yeah, that's absolutely incredible. And, I also, like I mentioned, I started my days in the child development lab, child study lab and ASU's lab space, and learned a lot about working with kids. But I think in a lot of ways, their families were really not a focus in the 90s. But now, that we are in the year 2021, certainly the focus has become much broader. And I think most providers are recognizing the role that we all kind of need to play in advocating for services for the entire family, because without that family support, the child will ultimately fall through the cracks. So tell me a little bit about bringing everybody under one roof. What was that process like for you? And, what were some of the challenges and celebrations that you've experienced along the way?
We like to think of ourselves as a one-stop shop, because when we have a family coming in to see Amber, for example, for occupational therapy, and she's discovering that they're having some language concerns, then we can refer them in-house for speech therapy. And then her and the speech therapist might say that mom is feeling very overwhelmed and doesn't have a lot of support at home, and she just really needs that break. So then we can say, okay, well, they really need an in-home caregiver. They need a respite. They need some, a break. So then we can either provide them a respite provider, provider, or certify a friend or family member if they have somebody that they really trust and they could be their paid caregiver. And so we kind of identify the need of the family and of the individual patient that we're treating and figuring out how we can best support them. Oftentimes those services are in-house, but sometimes they're not. Maybe we're just seeing that we're not getting a lot of therapy done because they need some behavior support. So then who can we talk to about those behavior supports? Or mom is looking for a certain type of parent training, parent support, connecting with other parents. And so we can provide that support to them. So it was just really important for us to be able to not just refer out, but be able to provide all those services under one roof, or now, virtually through all the clinics, but being able to just support the whole family in whatever they happen to be going through. And then the collaboration. So we're able to, Amber can talk to the speech therapist, she can talk to the PT and help them achieve their milestones. Not always quicker, but more efficiently. And we're kind of able to overlap services a little bit that way because Amber understands what they're working on in PT. She sees them in PT and can incorporate that into her session.
Right. Yeah, and you just described perfectly the whole point of integration, which is, really removing the silos. Our patients they don't see the silos, but they feel them when we are disconnected. And so, I love that under one roof, you have providers who can also communicate and collaborate in care, because there are so many ways that our care overlaps. So, as a behavioral health provider, I felt so many times like I was really missing out on the whole person because I wasn't part of an integrated medical team. I didn't have access to talk about medications or the pathophysiology or the anatomy issues. And certainly, in a lot of ways, I think that just the spiritual, energetic component of being a person with a health need, or a family with a kiddo with a health need or a developmental delay, and everything that comes with that, is just ignored. It's left to the side. And so, for providers to see the need and really say, okay, I'm going to address this by doing something about it, so energetic, and it's just very exciting. So, well, thank you for telling us. So you've kind of already answered one of the next questions, which was, what are some of the best parts about working as an integrated team? And, any challenges? What are some of the challenges that you found? Because integration isn't easy. And that's something that I like to talk about. The billing often gets in the way, especially with behavioral health billing. Oftentimes it's billed it is always billed very differently. It's still kind of the carve out model of billing. And so it's not, when billing in and of itself isn't integrated, that can sometimes lead to a lot of issues. And I know you work with DDD. I'm wondering, yes, what are some of the challenges and also successes that go along with that?
One of the main challenges is because we're state funded, we work with DDD, who honestly is really an incredible program or service that is available to families because it's free. These would be such an expensive cost to families when they're coming in for, 4, 5, 6 therapies a week. It would just be cost prohibitive. So they have the ability to receive, if they qualify, obviously, these state funded services. So that's a huge advantage of Arizona. Some of the disadvantages would be just simply things that happen when you receive state funds, and some of the additional red hoops that we have to jump through in order to get a kiddo qualified, to help them get an AAC device. Right now, we're not doing any co-treats. It would be great if Amber could be treating at the same time as PT is there and doing a co-treat together, or with speech. And right now we can't do that, just simply, as you mentioned, some of the billing issues and rules, and so that those pieces we can't do. It would also be nice to do sometimes more of an intensive program for a short period of time. And although the state allows that to an extent, it's really challenging to get it approved. So generally we don't have that flexibility. So in all reality, it really is, for the most part, fairly easy to manage and navigate those DDD services, but there are some challenges with just the extra steps that we have to go through, or things that we can't do because of their rules.
Right, absolutely. And that's kind of where policy and advocacy comes in. And, for most of us clinicians who, entered the business of healthcare as clinicians, to be there for patients and to provide that service for patients, their caregivers, and their families, it's very difficult for us to have any time to do the policy and advocacy work that needs to happen to remove some of those billing barriers. But that's another conversation for another time. So, well, Amber, tell me about the Astronaut Training Program. It's such an exciting thing on paper, but I'd love to hear from you, your perspective of what it is and how it's going.
Of course. So the astronaut training program is this amazing program. I mean, it's such a powerful tool to use for our kiddos, and it's something you have to be very careful with. So there's a lot of training that goes on with it. And the creators, I have their names here, Mary Kwar and Sheila Frick. So they created this program. So you have to go through this training. I think it was 2 days. I did mine online.
Okay.
COVID. And it's like a 2-day, 7-hour training where they just talk about all our vestibular systems, how it works, how it, how we see it in our kiddos, if they need the program, if they don't. So it's something that is still kind of new to me, so I'm getting used to it. I'm not a pro by any means, but just to give you a little background, it's a tool that it's designed to develop optimal vestibular function in our bodies. So our vestibular system is responsible for so much. It helps us know where we are in space. And it's basically the foundation for sensory processing and movement control. So if a kiddo has poor vestibular functioning, you'll see them falling over, maybe knocking into walls, trying to get input. So they're probably like really seeking and knocking into things, not able to sit still in class, which can be seen as disruptive. And that's really not what they're trying to do. There's so much more going on. So this protocol can be administered by a physical therapist or occupational therapist who took the training. Okay. So talking a little bit about our vestibular system, in our inner ear, we have these 3 semicircular canals. They're crossed like this, and then there's one that's diagonal. Okay. So what the system does is it puts you on a spin board, a board that just goes around and around, and we put the child in all different planes. So the first one is sitting up, the next one's laying down, and then we even have them on their side like this. So we're trying to activate all those systems to see, is this the reason why you're having a hard time in school, or balance, or why you're acting out is because you really don't have those developed all the way yet. So some people ask, well, how does that happen? How does your vestibular system not develop all the way? Right. What causes that? Some common things that can happen are ear infections when you're a kid, high fevers, allergies, trauma, and sometimes if a mom is put on bed rest, even before the baby's born, that can cause it too.
That's interesting. And I'm wondering, especially because for moms who are put on bed rest, often they're going to have a premature baby. If you have a preemie, I bet that is probably, you've got bed rest plus preemie.
Yes.
So I bet you work with a lot of those kiddos.
So yes, I've worked with a couple of kiddos who are preemies, and I've also worked with one the mom was put on bed rest very early. And so, his vestibular system wasn't developed at birth, and it never really got to develop later on because he was a preemie. So that time too. And what Mary said during our training was sometimes before the baby's even born, moms should do this program themselves to get kiddos inside that movement.
That is a very interesting, talk about earlier intervention and going upstream. And, my population is pregnant and postpartum women, and I'm all about there are so many things we could be doing that we're not. Yeah. Research is there. How can we get this applied and, sort of mainstream and, industry standard? So that is a really interesting, and, as you were talking, I'm also thinking of moms of multiples who are, especially one of my best friends had triplets, and she was put on bed rest, very early on. And, kiddos were definitely preemies. They were very small, but I'm just wondering, and I'm thinking, with the number of moms seeking fertility treatment, the number of multiples has been increasing in recent years. And so I'm assuming that there's a lot of need for getting this into maybe even fertility treatment centers.
And it's actually really interesting because a lot of my kiddos who I see are brothers, twins. I see a pair of triplet, there's just and they all act the same. I'm like, maybe it's before you're even born, you can start developing these systems that early. Absolutely. Yeah. So
and still so much we don't know about fetal
And
development.
it's a fairly new program, so they're still
Right.
figuring out what's best and what's the best way to do it. But it's just crazy how our vestibular system is just so powerful. It can influence our whole, like, just how we go through our daily lives.
Mm-hmm.
So
Man, that's just blowing my mind. And like I always say, like my colleagues and I will say, my hamsters are just jumping up from wheel to wheel, with all of these different thoughts and connections that I'm making. And I'm just thinking, my son, was not a preemie, but he definitely from birth had some OT issues, and we've tried over the years to get a referral to an occupational therapist to have an assessment, and it wasn't. And he just turned 15 in February, and it wasn't until November of 2020 that we finally got an accurate diagnosis for him, which is autism spectrum disorder. And so all of a sudden we have the ability to go and get, and so as I was looking at your website, I'm thinking, I would not be very surprised. And I've worked with a lot of moms and a lot of kids in the state of Arizona. So I would not be surprised if you're getting some older kids who are just getting an accurate diagnosis, or maybe a more accurate diagnosis. And of course, our understanding of what's going on with kiddos is evolving,
right.
And so what are some of the outcomes that you're seeing with some of the kiddos you're working with?
So I actually see one kiddo, he's a little older. I believe he's 11.
Mm-hmm.
And I just started the program when did I do the training? I did in October. So I started it with him in November. Yeah. And it's just I never used to spin him before sessions, and he was very sensory seeking. So he was running away from me, and it was difficult. And so after I did this, I said, okay, we're going to try and get him on the board. And mom came in and helped me sit him down. And after 3 or 4 sessions, he'll come in and sit on the board and wait to receive that input, because he wants, I guess he doesn't know how to activate those systems himself.
Yeah.
So
well, with sensory processing disorder, that's very true. And so you have, those who are hypo or hyper sensory speaking. And so it's either, like you mentioned, running into walls,
yes,
versus, sensory avoidant, because it's over, the world as it is too stimulating. So I can see what you're telling me is the kiddo was feeling good being activated on the board.
And I have some kids scared to get on the board still. And the great thing about this program is it's not just spinning on the board. They have pre-astronaut training exercises for you to do. So there's 4 or 5 exercises that you can do before you even put them on the board to see if they'll be able to tolerate it. And that's something I've noticed for my sensory avoiding kids. They don't like the board at all.
Okay.
But they'll do those exercises with me, and we're working up a tolerance for the board. So I mean, there's just a variety of kids you can do this with. And they even told me that I should do it on myself, that it's good for adults to do this program too.
Well, I was just thinking, can I get on your board?
I don't know. You get pretty dizzy. I did it to our physical therapist, and she was so dizzy.
Oh yeah, I can imagine. But I'm thinking those pre-astronaut training exercises would be really good. There are just, like I said, so many things. And with my son going through, what he's been going through since birth, I have always been able to see a lot of parallels between things that I've been going through and trying to figure out my whole life. But I mean, I'm in my 40s, and so there really was never anything like this before. OT was, I can't even remember, I want to say it was in the 90s before I ever heard of what even OT was. And that was with me being 5 years into the behavioral health field. So, this is definitely something that's evolving and growing and becoming more mainstream, which is great.
And I think a lot of parents really have an understanding of what physical therapy might be and what they would do, and even speech therapy. But occupational therapy, especially in the pediatric world, parents don't really understand what it is, what the sensory system means beyond the 5 senses, or and often we will explain to a parent, trying to help them understand the sensory system in terms of Winnie the Pooh characters, because you have the child who's bouncing off the walls like Tigger versus the kiddo with poor registration who is, acting like Eeyore. And so I'm trying to put it in kind of perspective for them to understand, more about the sensory system, having the OT explain what the sensory system does, what does sensory regulation mean, and how does that apply? What does occupational therapy do? Because it's just less well known when you say your child needs occupational therapy.
Right. Well, and I think too, a lot of parents without any knowledge about what OT is, what PT is, what speech and language therapy is, what sensory processing means, just kind of think, oh, that's an odd duck, or I don't want to bring this up because then there might be something wrong with my kid, and I don't want to think that there's something wrong with my kid. I'm just going to try to force him to be normal, or, somehow something I'm doing as a parent must be wrong, or, as a mom, I'm failing, versus, no, this is actually a medical need.
Right.
That you just didn't know existed.
Yeah. And a lot of parents, they don't know that occupational therapists do deal with sensory processing disorders too. They think, oh, it's just fine motor skills, or it's handwriting, or getting dressed. It entails all of that under this program.
Mm-hmm.
Your kiddo can have trouble with handwriting because they're moving too much on their desk and they need to get up and move around, and we need to get their sensory systems in line. Mm-hmm. And then maybe the problem's fixed. It could be nothing with their fine motor skills. It could be all sensory. So I really want to get it out there that occupational therapy is really more than just ADLs and fine motor. It's also sensory.
ADLs, for those of you who don't know, is activities of daily living. And, one of the other things that, kind of came up as you were talking was just the idea for the amount of confidence that it must raise in the kiddos that you work with, to be able to feel like they have some more control over what they are likely getting some negative feedback about from parents or school.
Right. I know some kids are thought of as disruptive and rude in classrooms, and kids get kicked out of preschool all the time for these kind of problems. And I wish there was a therapist there to just, explain to the teachers and the staff that they just need to do a little bit more than these other kids. They just need to regulate themselves, and then they'll be okay. Mm-hmm. And it breaks my heart when kids get kicked out of preschool because, oh my gosh, I just want to go and say, no, they're fine. We just need to spin them, or they need to do jumps or swing for a little, and then they'll be okay. So,
yeah. And that's the thing about the collaboration at home is, they come in for occupational therapy. Amber's able to utilize our sensory gym and so many of the things that we have here that they may not have at home. And so she develops a home program for ways that they can kind of meet their sensory needs at home, which then in turn empowers the parent at school maybe to say, well, he's disruptive because he's, sensory seeking, or he needs these different things like, jumping jacks or some other way to get that sensory input at school. And so it really empowers them to advocate for their child and what they need, saying that, no, they're not just a naughty little boy who keeps getting up, but they have some sensory needs that aren't being met.
Yeah. If I had my way, we would have a full medical team in every school, because, kids aren't just, the little industrial boxes that people put on a conveyor belt, from kindergarten through 12th grade. None of us fit inside of a box. And so, for us to be able to learn properly, we have a lot of, neurological and physical and physiological needs that need to be addressed. But I've worked in so many schools where there's just such a lack of understanding because educators don't have access to any of that training. So it would be a different world for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, tell me a little bit, so with my son being on the autism spectrum, obviously I have and I've worked with a lot of parents of kiddos with autism. A lot of my son's friends have autism. Tell me a little bit about some of the outcomes that you've seen when occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech and language, and then one of the other things I wanted to bring up too was animal assisted therapy, which I found on your website. I was super impressed by that. Very glad to see it. My son's done very well with animal assisted therapy, where no other therapy worked for him before. So tell me a little bit about what you're seeing, some of the highlight stories for you that really bring joy to your heart.
Animal assisted therapy is just so close to our heart. It's been amazing to see. It's really big in our Chandler clinic, and then we're just starting it in our Tucson and Phoenix clinics. But we use the dogs in a variety of different ways. We use it in feeding therapy because kiddos are super motivated to take a bite of food if they get to feed it to the dog. And buttoning your shirt and practicing dressing is very boring on your own body or on like a dressing board. But when you get to dress a dog and button up the dog, that's really fun. Or doing some tactile stuff. So the kiddo may not want to, touch the paint or whatever the activity may be, but when you can finger paint with the dog and they can paint and then you can paint, it makes, the child is just much more willing to do it. They will practice handwriting by writing a note to the dog. So the dog isn't always actively involved necessarily in every kind of component, but they're able to incorporate into the session. In speech therapy, they may read to the dog, and that's another way to, kind of practice those things. Or they'll do in physical therapy, throwing the ball to the dog or stomping on, the little thing that launches the ball to them. They take them on obstacle courses. There's just so many ways that we can incorporate animal-assisted therapy into the session to improve outcomes. And my favorite examples, like our poster child for animal-assisted therapy, is just the calmness sometimes that it brings. We always knew it was 3 o'clock on Tuesday because of the volume in the clinic, because of the particular kid who was escaping the room, screaming, could not participate, could not focus. And then after a few weeks of animal assisted therapy, we're like checking our clock. Is it really 3 o'clock? Because we don't hear the noise. Wow. And, that kiddo has just made huge strides in his development, achieved a lot of new milestones simply by adding the animal assisted therapy to his, routine.
It's like magic.
That's absolutely.
For us as providers, it's our dream come true. All we want is for these kiddos to make progress and have a happier life. And, when we see something like that is unlocked by a therapy that, most third-party insurance providers still will not cover, animal-assisted therapy. So for those of us who can see these kinds of outcomes in kiddos with more medically complex, maybe more medically fragile situations, my definite hope and my fingers are crossed in the direction of opening up those opportunities for kiddos who, maybe don't qualify for DDD, but, definitely still have those needs.
Absolutely. And even with music therapy, there's so many parents who report that their child responds to music and does better with music. And in music, you can incorporate a little bit of OT, a little bit of PT, a little bit of speech into your session, but using music. And so same thing, our kiddos are really achieving these huge milestones just by adding the music component to that. We also do Hippo Therapy. We have a PT who works at a ranch in the Santan Valley area, and she does PT, and Hippo Therapy is therapy on a horse. And I observed her just a few weeks ago, and she was talking about how her kiddo was toe walking. He constantly toe walks, but they found decreased toe walking anytime he has Hippo Therapy. And it's not just that day, but it's throughout the rest of the week that they notice that decrease in toe walking. And sitting the kiddo on the horse, really mimics the proper gait. And when you turn them around backwards, the sensory feedback, everything is coming in reverse. And there's just so many activities that they can do just utilizing the horse as a different modality for what could be just traditional, physical therapy. And that therapist really is incredible too. She does aquatic therapy, and she did that even through the pandemic. And through teletherapy, mom set her computer, brave, but she set her computer on the side of the pool, and she was able to kind of run her through some aquatic type stuff, because we really believe that, you have to do something else to help meet these milestones. And kids get so bored, and we treat long-term care kiddos. We see them for sometimes several years, and you have to kind of change things up and think outside the box, because our kiddos aren't typical, and we can't just provide typical therapy.
Right. You touched yet again on one of the questions I was going to ask about, just during COVID, what has it been like for services? How have you been meeting the needs despite the reduced ability to, see people in person?
Yeah, and I'll let Amber speak on this too, but we've done a lot of parent surveys throughout the pandemic and just making sure that we were meeting their needs and, who is ready to come back and what are you seeing? And it was a mixed bag. We had some parents who were just reporting it's simply not working. Their child cannot sit and attend to a task. They need some more, movement. But our therapists were really creative. We did a lot of training for them to find ways, again, to think outside the box, to get them away from the screen, but still be able to, conduct that therapy. But a lot of parents actually reported that their child is doing better and they're seeing larger improvements. And that's mainly because the parent is so actively involved as part of that session that they are responsible for doing all of the steps, and they really understand how they're supposed to be doing it. And then they see that their child can. So then later on in the next day, they're not just letting letting their child slide or doing it for them, they know that their child can do it. They saw them, they use the exact, verbiage and phrases and activities that the therapist did. And so they really feel empowered to continue helping their child. So we've had a lot of parents who really reported just amazing progress, by doing teletherapy because they're more actively involved. It certainly isn't for everyone, and Amber will share, I'm sure, some just experiences because it's been challenging just kind of being stuck in front of the screen. But I think that we really had some creative therapists who were able to get kiddos away from the screen, even though it was teletherapy.
Yeah, teletherapy is definitely not how I was trained in school to provide therapy. So it was a big change, not just for the families, but also for the therapists. So it took a little time to get used to, but I feel like the families are just so thankful now because they understand what we're doing in therapy and they know the reasons why we're doing things. And so I had, for example, I had one kiddo and the mom had a swing at home. And I said, well, before we get on the session, swing him and spin him and do all this and then bring him inside. And ever since then, he's been able to sit for our sessions. And I don't like doing things on the screen. I like getting materials in front of them and having tactile stimulation. So the parents understand, like when I'm talking about sensory now, like how we were talking, nobody knows what the vestibular system is. They don't understand. And now they know. And so they get to, like, they'll go to the park on their own and be able to implement that into like playtime at the park. And it's led to like increasing, like our kiddos are meeting their goals faster. It's just incredible. And we make home exercise programs so they're able to keep doing it. But now that I'm with them and we can see how they're doing, like I'll change things now and then, because usually we just tell them go home and get a ball and bounce them or get on a swing for a little. And now I can see what they have in the home. And I say, okay, that thing over there, put it on the floor, get that cushion, do jumps over the cushion, crash on the cushion, do squeezes in the cushion. I mean, I can think of anything when I see what they have available instead of just assuming that they have the same materials we have in the clinic. So it's been hard, but I think it's been really beneficial for some families too.
Well, the word that came up from both of you that I just was thinking and kind of feeling the whole time you were talking was empowerment, and just the idea that a parent now feels more comfortable and confident doing the exercises and leading the child through the exercise. Because as a parent, I know even myself, I'm a clinician. I've done a lot of different training, but I'm still hesitant sometimes because I think in my brain, I need to just let them do it because I might cause harm by trying to do it myself. But what you've actually done is through creativity, you've empowered them to learn how to do it themselves, to facilitate it themselves because there was no other choice. And now that they're doing that, the results, it just makes sense for them to be getting better outcomes. And I was also thinking, boy, those moms go to the park. Those other moms are going to see what they're doing. The moms are going to talk about what they're doing. And the other moms are going to be like, wow, maybe I need to learn how to do this.
Yeah, I think that they become the professional in the room when they're in the room with Amber, and Amber says, when you go home and try these things, they're like, okay, sounds good. And we talk about ways to support them, looking for barriers. If we're asking mom to do it in the morning and she's trying to get 5 kids out for school, it's not going to happen. Or she doesn't understand what we're asking, or she doesn't have the materials. And when she's at home doing it with her own, or it could be dad, their own items, they are the ones practicing. And so they feel like they really can do it because they've practiced it in addition to the child. And one thing we remind our therapists a lot is to high five the parent. We constantly are telling the kiddo, good job, high five, you're doing great. You're working hard, but the parents need to hear that too. They're the ones, whether they're teletherapy or home, we remind the therapist to high five the parent and remind them that they're doing a good job. It's hard to be a parent. It's exhausting, especially for a child of a disability. And sometimes they just need to be told, Mom, you're doing great. Dad, awesome. I'm noticing improvements. Like, good job showing up today. If that's all that you could do, good job showing up.
Right. Absolutely. Especially throughout the pandemic and especially in the lockdown timeframes, where, there was no childcare available, no respite available, no services available. And parents were trying to do school from home and care from home and also maybe even work from home in a lot of cases. So I really love that approach to support the whole family and to really look at the family as, okay, who is supporting this child, and what are some of their needs, and what is possible from our perspective? Is it education? Is it empowerment? Is it just high five, man, your job is hard. Thank you for doing it. Keep it up. That goes a long way. And I can say, as a parent who's been in those shoes, I can definitely say any high five that I got was just like made my day. So when you get a lot of negative feedback from school or daycare providers, or, you know, the community at large, you know, when your kiddo's screaming in the grocery store, et cetera, you know, a high five goes a long way. So,
and that's so true, because they spend a lot of their day with maybe that phone call from the school, from whatever else happened, and then, you know, their aftercare program or whatever, their friends, their siblings, all these kind of hard things throughout their day, and then they take their child to an evaluation for therapy, or from the psychologist, or school, and then they're asking how your child is doing, and they're asking, can they do this, can they do that, and the answer is no. And so we also try to empower them to say not yet, because we feel that they can achieve these milestones. So when we're asking, can your child, you know, XYZ, and they respond no, well, it's not yet, because we believe that they have the ability to accomplish that milestone. And then again, it kind of changes the narrative, in that, like, walking out of this eval, like, oh my gosh, they're so far behind, they can't do all these things. But then they leave like, oh, we're going to be able to do all of this, and he can do all these things, and we're on the right path.
yeah, the difference between no and not yet is I have a future in front of me that I can get to, versus no just as a closed door. And it's an uncertain future, and it feels very disempowering and sad.
And for the child to hear that too, they're constantly, you know, their parent is constantly answering the things that they can't do during an evaluation. They also talk about the things that they can do, and the things that they're good at, and the things that they enjoy. And it's not just all this kind of like negative, you know, pieces, because they hear that too. It's not just the parent, but the child hears that too. And then they can believe in themselves.
Right. Well, it's everything that a kiddo hears from, you know, well, if you're not on task, then you're not, you know, doing what you're supposed to be doing. And a child is inevitably going to interpret that as, then I'm a bad kid.
Yes.
I'm just not, I'm a bad egg or whatever. So even if adults are careful, and they're not always, about how they communicate with the kid, or motivate the kid, or, you know, redirect the child, it still comes across very clearly to the child as a no versus a not yet. So yeah, I love that approach. And I think the more work that you all are doing with empowering parents to use that same language, the child will inevitably adopt that same language themselves. And they feel like, okay, I have a goal. I may not be able to do it right now or today, but it doesn't mean I will never be able to do it. I have a goal that I can work towards from here. That's awesome. Thank you. Well, I'm wondering too about just integration. What are some of the gaps that you all are experiencing in integrated care? I mean, there's no shortage of services, you know, for kiddos with developmental disabilities and delays with their families. So what are some of the gaps that you see that you'd like to address in the future?
That's an interesting question. I think, again, if we could reduce some of those red hoops that we have to jump through, and allow, you know, Amber to work with PT at the same time, and really collaborate more during the session, and you know, I think that would be helpful for them. Just in general, we treat a lot of Spanish speaking families, and there's not a lot of Spanish speaking therapists. And so we utilize a Spanish speaking admin so that we can still help and support them, because many times the child may speak English or are bilingual, but the parent is not. And so it's important to us to have that ability to still, you know, talk to the family, do that evaluation, provide them the home program, be that support to Amber so that she can, you know, support that family. And there's a lot of caregiver shortage right now. So we talk about this whole family care. I just got an email this morning about a family, or the therapist saying, mom is overwhelmed. Like, what can we do? You know, she's really overwhelmed. She's not showing up to therapy. You know, the child's not making progress because they're not showing up because mom is overwhelmed. But there's a caregiver shortage. And so finding quality caregivers, finding somebody, you know, that will drive to the area or whatever it may be. But the caregiver shortage is definitely affecting a lot of different families.
Yeah, absolutely. Within that caregiver shortage, I know that Milestones and Cummings Graduate Institute are partnering to do some training and education. Tell me a little bit about what you look forward to with that.
Yeah, so Amber, the same PT who's done the Hippo Therapy, she did her first webinar recently on just teletherapy practices, and she has a couple of other ones that she's coming up on that, integrating kind of how she integrates speech therapy and OT into her session, and how she uses that integrative and collaborative approach to therapy. So we were excited at the opportunity to kind of use our therapists and allow them to grow. We really are have a big focus on growth, and this was just another exciting step for her that just in her career. And then we knew that our other therapists would benefit from it, your students and general population would benefit from as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Our doctors of behavioral health students are incredibly innovative. I just did a podcast a little earlier today with one of the doctors of behavioral health that I actually was first introduced to as a student, and then since graduation we both have stayed in touch, and he's now one of our board of directors members, and he works in Oklahoma City. And one of the things that we were talking about was just the idea that doctors of behavioral health we don't see a box anymore, we just see a whole person, we see a whole family, and we're constantly thinking about all of the various providers' needs, tools, strategies that can be wrapped around those individuals to help them get where we know they can get to. Like you said, we have that hope, we have that future, we have that vision for them. And so I always like to put any kind of therapies that are available in front of our students so that they know that they're available. If they are looking for them in their area and they're not available, then they're also thinking about how can we get it here? So, whether that's through building a partnership with OTs, PTs, speech and language pathologies, in their area, or just a pediatric business like the one that you've created to get the therapies into their localities so that they can expand that access. That's really what we're all about. So I am very, very grateful that you're going to be providing some additional webinars. What are some of the additional topics? I know you guys are going to do a series of webinars. What else are you going to be talking about?
Yeah, so our first two, I know she's recorded one, but it was just about teletherapy for the pediatric patient and physical therapy. And again, just what that looks like, because as Amber kind of mentioned too, it's not just sitting behind a screen, kind of like we're doing now. It's out of the seat, out of the box. Like I said, she did aquatics therapy. She did a lot of different ways behind the screen without being just sitting at that desk. And then she's doing one on integrating other domains. So and other services, how do you incorporate or integrate speech therapy and occupational therapy in a physical therapy session? We always say, you don't know what you don't know until you don't know. And when we get and somebody from maybe a new grad from speech, they don't even realize that they need to know anything about sensory integration because it's not discussed in school. And in OT, they may not realize that they need to know how to utilize an AAC device, a communication device, because that was not taught in school. And PT, same thing with, with the sensory integration, all those other pieces, they don't realize that that's part of treating the whole patient simply because it's not taught in school. And so part of our training process, part of our collaborative approach helps with that cross training so that they have that knowledge and foundation, so that if they're coming in for speech therapy, they know how to get that child regulated first, and then they're successful. We have to work together so that the child can be successful.
Yeah, I love that.